It's the fastest airplane ever flown.
Скорость было достаточно, 3,2 Маха.
It flew higher and faster than any vehicle has ever flown before.
Если поставить задачу, он будет выполнять.
Надежно охраняет ее границы.
The successes of the American photographic surveillance of the Soviet Union included pictures of the Soviet ICBM test facilities.
How did the Soviet military try to hunt down satellites with fighter planes?
Такой проект действительно в Советском Союзе существовал.
And how did the USA respond?
Снаряд, который был головной частью, он должен был разрушать любой искусственный спутник.
After Nikita Khrushchev came to power in the mid-1950s, the Soviet Union made attempts to change the course of its foreign policy. An armistice agreement was signed in Korea. Diplomatic relations were established with West Germany, a republic that after the war created territories in the American, British, and French occupation zones. Finally, in 1956, Khrushchev announced that a new world war was not inevitable, as was previously believed in the USSR. However, it was during this period that the confrontation between the superpowers began in near space. Both sides wanted to know as much as possible about each other's military capabilities. Both countries already possessed nuclear weapons. Moreover, the US had already developed several plans for a nuclear attack against the Soviet Union. One of them, Operation Dropshot, involved using 300 nuclear bombs to hit major Soviet cities. It was important for the US government to understand whether the Soviet Union had the ability to respond to a nuclear strike. But how would it be possible to get this information when it was almost impossible to penetrate the Iron Curtain, let alone get close to strategic Soviet targets? In January 1956, the Pentagon launched the active phase of Operation Genetrix, and balloons bearing ultra-precise photographic equipment were launched from airfields of countries friendly to America.
There was this Genetrix program where they attempted to use balloons, launch just hundreds of balloons and let them fly over the Soviet Union and take pictures. Well, they were flying at 30 kilometers or so.
According to the plan, at the moments when the balloons left Soviet airspace, which was supposed to happen in the Far East, the gondolas would be caught with the help of radio signals and parachute down to the sea where American ships would find them.
They launched 500 and some odd balloons, and I think only 40 of them were recovered. So that didn't work very well, but it just shows you how desperate they were to get some kind of hard intelligence out of the Soviet Union to monitor.
In the summer of that year, an American U-2 reconnaissance aircraft designed to fly over the Soviet Union took to the skies. Initially, the CIA believed the plane would be invisible to Soviet control systems, but they were wrong. Soviet radars saw the intruder perfectly, but couldn't do anything about it. Soviet fighters could not reach the U-2, which flew at an altitude of over 20 kilometers. The space spy remained invulnerable over Soviet territory, photographing secret facilities, including factories, airfields, and missile launching positions that, of course, were of interest to the Pentagon. The flights were launched from airfields in West Germany, Turkey, and later Pakistan.
These things became operational at Peshawar in Pakistan at a secret base, and they flew missions from there across the center of the Soviet Union to Bodo in Norway. Among the things that they were interested in photographing were Soviet ICBM facilities, Soviet space launch facilities, anything involving the Soviet nuclear strike capability. There was no parallel aircraft program deployed by the Soviet Union.
The U-2 flew over the USSR scot-free until May 1st, 1960, when it was shot down by an anti-aircraft missile. The pilot, Gary Powers, survived and was convicted of espionage. He was later exchanged for Soviet intelligence agent Rudolf Abel. In 1960, just 4 months before the U-2 was shot down, American reconnaissance aircraft appeared over the USSR at least 20 times. Why, you ask? The arms race was rapidly gaining momentum. If the US was winning in terms of aviation, it was losing when it came to space. The Soviet launch of the first satellite led to a crisis in the United States. After all, if the USSR was capable of putting a satellite into orbit, then they could also use a rocket to deliver atomic bombs. In 1958, the United States conducted nuclear tests in space, and it goes without saying that the American military was extremely interested in how the Soviet Union would react. That's why, despite the incident with the U-2, America never considered abandoning its reconnaissance flights. What's more, the United States soon acquired the Blackbird, a reconnaissance aircraft dubbed SR-71 that could climb to an altitude of 25 kilometers and reach speeds over 3,000 kilometers per hour.
While the U-2 tried to evade Soviet air defenses by flying high, the SR-71 takes it a step further by flying high and also flying fast. It's the fastest airplane ever flown.
The SR-71 was a technological leap forward in terms of capability beyond the U-2. It was developed in an unusual way by Kelly Johnson and a team at what is known as the Lockheed Skunk Works. It flew higher and faster than any vehicle has ever flown before. The reality was it flew so high and so fast, it probably would elude any sort of ground-based anti-aircraft capability, missiles or cannon.
The Soviet Union still had no aircraft that could rival the SR-71. Artyom Mikoyan's design bureau was tasked with creating a Predator capable of catching the Blackbird and putting an end to U.S. military superiority in near space. Soviet scientists were tasked with building something that could also reach the stars and 3 speeds of sound, and that resulted in the MiG-25, or Foxbat, as the Americans called it. Now, it was made right here in Nizhny Novgorod, where we are today, and one of the first planes is now a museum exhibit. The fierce competition between the USSR and the USA was governed by a simple principle. Whoever flies faster and higher wins, and the MiG-25 became one of the Cold War's major players in the air. When the MiG-25 was first revealed at an aircraft parade in Moscow, it made a strong impression in the West. The experts there didn't know that the USSR was capable of developing such a fighter, and its appearance caused great concern. In the 60s, a Soviet plane was developed that could fly at 3 times the speed of sound and hit targets at various heights up to 25 kilometers away.
Свой самолет СР-71. Это выдающийся по отдельным показательным самолет, который летал высоко, быстро и так далее. И начали, как говорится, в наглую пересекать наши границы. Но появился самолет МиГ-25, который закрыл эту тему. При этом МиГ-25 мы делали сотнями штук, и он поставлялся почти в 30 стран. У них СР-71 был сделан штучные экземпляры. При этом он, МиГ-25, доставал его на той высоте, на которой работал СР-71, и скорость была достаточно, 3,2 Маха.
The state-of-the-art MiG-25 was also tested in actual combat conditions. During the war between Israel and Egypt, the experimental aircraft conducted reconnaissance flights over the occupied Sinai Peninsula and Tel Aviv.
Самолеты МиГ-25 занимались разведкой. Во время одного из полетов, как вспоминал наш летчик, такой самолет вынужден был пролететь на территории Израиля, над, соответственно, домом премьер-министра. Все это сфотографировать, и потом, соответственно, президенту Египта эти фотографии положили. Ну, а начальник генерального штаба Израиля и командующий военно-воздушными силами вынуждены были уйти в отставку.
Needless to say, U.S. intelligence dreamed of obtaining detailed information about the aircraft. But how could they get near it? Foreigners were forbidden from even entering Nizhny Novgorod, the town where the plane was created. That's how carefully the USSR guarded its military secrets. By then, the USSR was already thinking about a new aircraft. The designers were tasked with creating a jet fighter that could shoot down even spy satellites over the Soviet Union. It's the 60s, and the Mikoyan factory is busy with the finalizing touches on the supersonic MiG-25 fighter, which has many attributes but still not good enough to shoot down satellites. That's when Soviet scientists decide to use this as a base to create a brand new fighter, the MiG-31. Now, on the outside, these planes may look similar, but in reality, they're very different. The newer one had new engines. It had a seat for a co-pilot right here. We can see it. And new cabin equipment, the Zaslon radar system. The radars were located at the front of the aircraft where the nose is right there. MiG-31 became the only fighter in the world to be equipped with such radars, and it remained the only fighter in production from 1981 until the year 2000. What's most important for a jet fighter? To detect the target as early as possible, track and target it, and fire missiles at it if necessary. The Soviet Union's Zaslon radar system was one of the Soviet engineers' greatest successes. It did an excellent job of detecting targets. The first prototypes could detect targets at a distance of 120 kilometers. Over time, this range would increase to almost 400 kilometers. The MiG-31 is capable of flying at supersonic speeds for a long time, and this is its main advantage over all existing interceptors. It can hunt both at low altitude and in near space. Now, in order to ensure a good flight range, the aircraft needed to have a high-power engine that was also economical. Nobody else in the world had anything like it at that time. The engine was specially developed for the new aircraft, and it is precisely because of this that the MiG-31 remains the fastest combat aircraft in the world. How else could the USSR protect its 63,000-kilometer border, the longest in the world?
Когда в Соединенных Штатах появились самолеты, обладающие большой дальностью полета, способные нести крылатые ракеты большой дальности, летающие на низких высотах, появилась угроза нападения на Советский Союз через Северный полюс, северных рубежей. И возникла необходимость защиты этих рубежей. Было два альтернативных варианта. Первый вариант – по периметру севера расставить локаторы мощные и установить противовоздушные комплексы ракетной обороны. И был второй вариант – разработать новый самолет, обладающий большой дальностью полета, большой скоростью, большой высотой полета и имеющий мощный локатор, способный обнаруживать цели, в том числе и низколетящие, на большом расстоянии. В конце концов, остановились на этом варианте.
Spy satellites came to play a significant role during this phase of the Cold War. Their flight paths over the USSR were calculated so as to cover the most sensitive military facilities. And the new aircraft, which was being developed in high secrecy, had to be hidden from space spies.
В цехе висела табличка, когда спутник висит над нашей территорией, Если белый цвет был, это значит спутников нет, можно спокойно вести. Если розовый там и до красного доходило, обязательно защита и чехло. На крылья одевались металлические накладки. Если смотреть с воздуха или из космоса, везли Змея Горыныча, такого развивающегося всего.
On June 18, 1979, Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev and U.S. President Jimmy Carter signed the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. While that helped curb the nuclear arms race, it didn't put an end to the Cold War, and the superpowers continued to develop their superweapons. In the USSR, this was the MiG-31. A jet fighter that can fly at any time of day in any weather. It is a universal soldier, a hunter of planes, cruise and ballistic missiles, and even satellites. The MiG-31 is a very formidable opponent. The United States also tried to shoot down satellites with an airplane. A rocket was fixed under the fuselage of an F-15 aircraft which lifted it into the sky, and then all that remained was to indicate the target. During tests on September 15, 1985, an F-15 pilot fired a rocket that destroyed the satellite at an altitude of 450 kilometers. However, doubts about the success of this operation remain.
Спутник рассыпался в мелкие брызги, так скажем, и часть этих брызг ушла на более высокие орбиты. Это может быть только при бризантном взрыве внутри спутника. А в то время эти спутники все более-менее носили разведывательный характер, и в них всегда помещалась и у американцев, и у нас система аварийного подрыва объекта. Когда он исчерпал весь ресурс и не нужен, и чтобы никому не достался, его просто уничтожали. Поэтому вполне возможно, что это был спектакль.
The MiG-31 could strike satellites long before the U.S. tests. The first modifications of this plane had the R-33 missiles at the bottom where the fuselage is, and it could strike enemy aircraft from a distance of up to 120 kilometers. And that was the Soviets' response to the US-developed F-14A fighter with the AIM-54A missiles. Now let's move further up, I should say, and look at the missiles under the wing of the aircraft. They had the R-37 long-range ones, and they could obliterate totally any enemy aircraft. There were also infrared-guided missiles, and Soviet designers took it one step further. So if desired, those missiles could be replaced with aerial bombs that could be suspended from the exact same place, each one of them weighing a whopping 1.5 tons. But of course, for our test, none of this will be here. The R-37 can hit air targets at distances of up to 300 kilometers. The R-33's range is 120 kilometers. Rare combat test footage shows how the MiG-31 fights in the air. The pilot sees a target on his locator, takes aim, and attacks. Today, this versatile hunter will climb to the maximum permissible altitude and reach near space. This MiG-31 is almost ready for takeoff. But I won't just be talking to the pilots, I'll be filming as well. I'll be setting up this camera right here so we can see the pilots' point of view as they take off. Just their faces. Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to show you inside the cabin, but let me just tell you, it looks very, very cool and interesting, and I wish we could show you, but it's a secret. I am actually terrified to be sitting here because I'm terrified of heights, but we're going to try and make this work. Okay, so we have the test pilot up front and another test pilot right here next to me. It's right before the flight. From what I understand, both of the cabins are pressurized and the seats can be ejected. That's all I know. We're not allowed to show much, but we can find out how they feel. Can you tell me, have you ever reached the height of 20 kilometers?
Yes.
And when was that and what did it feel like?
Ощущения такие, что с этой высоты уже видно, что небо над тобой не такое голубое, оно становится уже серым. Красиво. Уже виден легкий изгиб земли.
Is it scary?
Ну, обычно ощущение нормальный полет. Если это красиво, это здорово, это интересно. Просто есть состояние, какое-то состояние вот этого полета. Ну, это классно, это красиво.
The time it takes for a pilot to take off after climbing into the cockpit is only a matter of minutes. A final pre-flight check, a brief exchange with air traffic control, and the plane heads for the runway. You can see just how much wind it's producing, and it's literally blowing the trees there. So I can only imagine what will happen once it does the run and comes all the way here, and we'll be right here to watch it up close and personal. Here we go. This is really exciting. It's about to take off. Whoa! That was incredible. Literally, the ground was shaking over here. It's so loud, you can barely hear. Taking a plane to near space sounds incredible, but it's a reality. And today we get to see this MiG climbing to that altitude. But what does it feel like to take a MiG-31 fighter into the sky? We can experience it for ourselves. When the MiG-31 was built in the late 70s, no one could even dream that in the future, pilots would be able to train using such a technology. And today we were given the unique opportunity to try out these simulators ourselves. We will not be trying out the MiG-31 simulator because the cockpit, the information on it is highly sensitive and secretive, but we were given access to its predecessor, the MiG-29. And from what I'm told, they look practically the same, and the way they are controlled is also very similar. So let's try it. We have the help of an experienced instructor without whom we wouldn't have managed. At first, it seems like all these buttons and gauges are too much for the average person to handle.
Поднимай ручку на себя, на себя, на себя, на себя. Это много. Взмыло. И садимся.
Land.
Yes.
Hold on, but I'm still
И тормозной парашют на кнопку вот так нажимаем.
Вот это?
Да, тормозные парашюты. И можно тормозить. Тормоз.
But seriously, I just landed that myself.
Посадил, да.
By myself. At some point, it starts to feel like it's not that difficult to fly a fighter jet. But the simulator doesn't reproduce the G-forces the pilot experiences during flight, when your body is forced back into the seat and your hands slip from the control stick as if you have heavy kettlebells strapped to them. We'll create the same sensation with the help of special weights.
Реальный пилот должен испытывать настоящие перегрузки.
Okay, well, it's not easy, let me tell you, and I don't think I have fully the weight to feel exactly what the pilot is experiencing, but this is a hardcore workout. I can already feel that my back is killing me. How do pilots manage?
Им помогает противоперегрузочный костюм.
So they don't feel this pressure because of the G-suits?
Они ощущают, он им помогает просто не отключиться.
Oh.
Кровь отливает от головы.
Soviet designers solved the overload problem with the help of a special suit that consisted of rubber chambers which filled with air and squeezed the body at a certain altitude, sort of like when your arm is being squeezed, when your blood pressure is being measured. But air in the lungs on which the suit is now pressing will seek a way out and rapidly head towards the nose and ears. We are now entering the watchtower, which is where the flight controller is monitoring everything that is going on. You don't want to disturb him. How is the flight going?
Все здесь написано. Позывной, высота, азимутальность, остаток топлива и скорость.
Do you still reach 36,000 meters?
36 тысяч – это рекордная высота. У нас есть рабочие высоты. Рабочие высоты до 20 тысяч. Но этой высоты достаточно для перехвата всех летающих воздушных судов, аппаратов.
They've already reached their maximum speed. They've gone supersonic. And they've reached their maximum altitude. At this point, you can't feel the speed at all. But just imagine, at that very moment, the plane is flying almost 6 times faster than a bullet. So can a MiG-31 intercept and eliminate a satellite?
Если поставить задачу, он будет выполнять.
The MiG-31 was created in the last decade of the Cold War and still has no equivalents. A lot of other technology that was developed during the arms race is still in demand in both countries. In the late 80s, many thought the Cold War would end in the 90s and that the confrontation would be relegated to history. But it turns out that history is repeating itself. The United States is increasing its army of spy satellites and strengthening its space strike force. But we won't know what they're up to in those Cold War-era workshops for a very long time. The competition in space exploration has intensified in the 21st century, with more countries now participating. And even though no one openly talks about the reality of Star Wars, they aren't refraining from initiating military projects in space.